Which part of the brain controls balance and coordination? Cerebellum. The functional unit of the nervous system is neuron. Which cranial nerve is responsible for vision? Optic nerve 2. The largest part of the brain is cerebrum. The spinal cord ends at the level of L1 to L2. Which neurotransmitter is deficient in Parkinson's disease? Dopamine. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary body functions. Which lobe of the brain is responsible for vision? Occipital lobe. The myelin sheath in the PNS is formed by Schwann cells. Which cranial nerve is known as the vagus nerve? Which lobe of the brain controls hearing? Temporal. The meninges consist of three layers. Which is the outermost meningeal layer? Dura mater. Cerebrospinal fluid CSF is mainly produced by the choroid plexus. The normal adult Glasgow Coma Scale GCS score is (15). Which cranial nerve is responsible for smell? The reflex center for breathing is located in the medulla oblongata. Which lobe is primarily responsible for touch sensation? Parietal. The longest cranial nerve is vagus nerve. The brainstem consists of midbrain, pons, medulla. The neurotransmitter released at the neuromuscular junction is acetylcholine. The sympathetic nervous system is also known as the fight or flight system. Which cranial nerve controls facial expression? Seven. The parasympathetic nervous system mainly conserves energy. Which part of the neuron receives impulses? Dendrite. The gap between two neurons is called synapse. Which cells provide immune defense in the CNS? Microglia. The hypothalamus regulates temperature and hunger. Which ventricle is located between the brainstem and cerebellum? Fourth ventricle. Which cranial nerve is responsible for hearing and balance? Eight. The covering of the axon is called myelin sheath. Which lobe controls voluntary motor activity? Frontal. The central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system includes Cranial and spinal nerves. Which cranial nerve controls tongue movement? (12) Which electrolyte is most important for nerve impulse transmission? Sodium and potassium. The protective fluid around the brain and spinal cord is cerebrospinal fluid. The largest cranial nerve is trigeminal nerve 5. Which disease is characterized by demyelination of the CNS? Multiple sclerosis. Which part of the brain relays sensory information? Thalamus. Which cranial nerve supplies the muscles of mastication? Trigeminal nerve 5. Which glial cells form myelin in the CNS? Oligodendrocytes. Which part of the neuron conducts impulses away from the cell body? Axon. The normal adult brain weighs approximately 1,400 grams. The knee-jerk reflex is an example of a Which cranial nerve is responsible for swallowing? Glossopharyngeal 9. Which part of the brain regulates emotions? Limbic system. The major inhibitory neurotransmitter in the CNS is GABA. The functional junction between a neuron and a muscle fiber is called the neuromuscular junction. Which cranial nerve controls most parasympathetic functions of the thoracic and abdominal organs? Vagus 10. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos.